The stars looked different now that the Vorthak Empire owned them. General Krexthor stood on the command deck of his massive warship and smiled at the view. 17 star systems belonged to his empire now, and he had conquered them all in just 3 months. His reflection showed in the metal walls around him. 8 feet tall with gray skin-like armor and 4 powerful arms that could crush steel. No enemy had ever defeated him in 200 years of war. Behind him, his officers worked at their stations. All of them were Vorthak like him, with the same 4 arms and metal skin. They moved quickly when he was near because everyone knew General. Krexthor did not accept failure. His sharp teeth and red eyes made even his own soldiers nervous. The Empire had made him their greatest general because he won every battle and showed no mercy to anyone who opposed them. The latest reports made him laugh. A small human mining colony on a planet called Kepler 442b was refusing to surrender. These humans were strange creatures with only 2 arms and soft pink skin. They looked weak and pathetic compared to the mighty Vorthak. Most species surrendered as soon as they saw the Empire warships, but these humans were different. They sent messages saying they would not give up their world. Krexthor had studied humans before attacking their colonies. They were a young species that had only left their home planet 50 years ago. Their technology was basic and their bodies were fragile. An average human weighed maybe 1/4 as much as a Vorthak warrior. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. Their bones broke easily, and their skin offered no protection. It was amazing they had survived long enough to reach space at all. The mining colony on Kepler 442b was especially small and weak. Intelligence reports showed only 3,000 humans living there. They worked deep underground, digging for valuable minerals that they sent back to Earth. The colony had no military ships and no weapons bigger than mining tools. A single Vorthak destroyer could wipe out the entire settlement in minutes. But then the humans sent a message that made everyone on the command ship start laughing. The message came from someone called Kim Tae, who claimed to be the colony leader. His voice was calm and quiet as he spoke through the communication system. He looked like an ordinary human with brown hair and dark eyes. Nothing about him seemed dangerous or special. General Krexthor. Kim Tae said in the message, "I know you think we will surrender like the other colonies, but we are different. We have a proposal for you. Send 1 representative from your empire to meet 1 representative from our colony. Single combat to decide who wins. If your representative wins, you can have our planet. If our representative wins, you leave us alone and never come back." The entire command deck erupted in laughter when the message ended. Krexthor laughed so hard, his metal skin actually changed color. His officers pointed at the screen and made jokes about the stupid humans. The idea that any human could fight a Vorthak warrior was completely ridiculous. Even a small Vorthak child was stronger than a full-grown human adult. "These creatures must be insane," said Commander Vextar, who served as Krexthor's second-in-command. "Do they really think they can defeat us in combat? One of our soldiers could fight 100 humans and still win easily." Krexthor wiped tears from his red eyes as his laughter finally stopped. This was too entertaining to pass up. He had been feeling bored lately because conquering weak species was becoming too easy. Maybe playing with these deluded humans would provide some amusement before he destroyed them all. "I will go myself," he announced to his shocked officers. "This will be fun. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize how foolish they have been." His officers tried to talk him out of it. Surely the great general should not waste his time with such pathetic opponents. Any regular soldier could handle this task, but Krexthor had made up his mind. He wanted to personally crush the spirit of these stubborn humans before wiping out their colony. "Should we prepare your battle armor, sir?" asked Lieutenant Zorkim. "And which weapons will you require?" Krexthor laughed again and waved all 4 arms dismissively. "No armor and no weapons. These soft little creatures are not worth the effort of arming myself. I will defeat their champion with my bare hands and then watch them weep." The warship moved into orbit around Kepler 442b, and Krexthor prepared for his trip to the surface. The planet looked brown and dusty from space, with only a few small settlements visible. The main human colony was built around their mining operations. Simple metal buildings connected by dirt roads. No defensive walls or weapon emplacements. It looked more like a construction site than a military target. As his shuttle descended toward the planet, Krexthor thought about how he would handle this situation. First, he would toy with whatever pathetic human they sent to fight him. Maybe. He would break one arm at a time to make it last longer. Then he would demand they surrender and beg for mercy. After they submitted, he would kill them all anyway because that was what the Empire expected. The shuttle landed in the center of the human settlement, and Krexthor stepped out. Every human in sight stopped what they were doing to stare at him. Their faces showed fear and amazement at his size and power. Good. They were already starting to understand their mistake. Kim Tae walked forward to meet him, and Krexthor almost started laughing again. This was their leader? He looked like an ordinary worker covered in dust from the mines. His clothes were simple and worn. His hair was going gray, and his hands were rough from manual labor. Standing next to Krexthor, he looked like a child next to a giant. "So you are the leader of these worms," Krexthor said, in a voice that echoed across the settlement. His translator device made sure all the humans could understand his words. I'm General Krexthor of the Vorthak Empire. I have destroyed armies of millions. I have burned entire worlds to ash. And you think you can challenge me? Kim Tae looked up at him without showing any fear. His dark eyes were calm and steady. "I think you do not understand what you are dealing with, General," he replied quietly. This made Krexthor roar with laughter once again. Several of his officers who had come to watch joined in the mocking sounds. The idea that this tiny human could threaten the supreme commander of the Vorthak Empire was beyond ridiculous. This was going to be even more entertaining than he had hoped. Krexthor flexed all four of his massive arms as he stared down at Kim Tae. The human looked so small and fragile standing there in his dirty work clothes. The general wanted everyone to see the difference between them. He was a perfect warrior built for conquest and destruction. This human was just a weak little creature that should be cowering in fear. "Look at yourself, little worm," Krexthor sneered as his voice boomed across the mining settlement. "You are nothing compared to me. I have 4 arms, each one stronger than your entire body. My bones are denser than your strongest metals. My reflexes are 10 times faster than anything your pathetic species can achieve." The other humans gathered around to watch, but they stayed far back. Many of them looked scared as they saw their leader facing the enormous alien general. Some of the women were covering their children's eyes. They knew they were about to watch Kim Tae get killed, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Kim Tae remained perfectly calm as he listened to the general's boasting. His expression never changed, and his hands stayed relaxed at his sides. To the watching Vorthak officers, this looked like a human who had given up hope. They expected him to start begging for mercy at any moment. "I have trained in combat for longer than your species has had space flight," Krexthor continued. "I have killed warriors from a dozen different worlds. Some of them were 3 times your size with natural weapons that could cut through steel. And they all fell before my power." But Park Hai, who worked as the colony's chief engineer, was watching from nearby, and she knew something the aliens did not know. She had worked with Kim Tae for 15 years, ever since they both left Earth to help build this mining operation. She knew that Kim Tae had not always been a peaceful colony administrator who spent his days managing mineral extraction and equipment maintenance. Before coming to Kepler 442b, Kim Tae had spent 20 years working for Earth's military. Not as a regular soldier, but as a combat instructor for the Special Forces. He had trained the most elite human fighters to face impossible odds and win through skill rather than strength. His job was teaching soldiers how to fight enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. Kim Tae had studied every known alien species that humans might encounter in space. He learned their anatomy, their fighting styles, their weaknesses, and their blind spots. He spent years developing techniques that could work against opponents who were physically superior in every way. The key was never fighting strength against strength, but using an enemy's power against them. But all that training and knowledge came from a time when humanity expected to face hostile aliens in space. When Kim Tae grew tired of war and violence, he had chosen a quiet life among the miners. He wanted to build things instead of destroying them. For 15 years, he had been a peaceful man who avoided conflicts and solved problems through talking rather than fighting. Now, as he faced the enormous alien general, something was awakening inside him. All those years of training and combat knowledge were rising to the surface, like a sleeping dragon opening its eyes. His body remembered movements and techniques that his peaceful mind had tried to forget. "You humans are all the same," Krexthor said with disgust. "Weak and cowardly. Your entire species should have stayed on your little planet instead of spreading through space like a disease. But do not worry. After I crush you, the Empire will make sure no more humans cause trouble." Lee Sung had been Kim Tae's first teacher back on Earth many years ago. The old master had taught him that strength was not always an advantage. "The mighty oak tree looks powerful and impressive," Lee Sung used to say, "but when the storm comes, the oak breaks while the flexible reed bends and survives." Kim Tae had never forgotten those lessons even during his peaceful years on Kepler 442b. Now he could hear his teacher's voice in his mind as clearly as if the old man was standing right beside him. Every technique, every principle, every secret of fighting against impossible odds was coming back to him. The watching humans did not understand what they were seeing. To them, Kim Tae looked like an ordinary middle-aged man who was about to be murdered by an alien monster. They had no idea that their quiet colony leader had once been one of Earth's most skilled combat instructors. They did not know he had trained thousands of soldiers to win battles against superior enemies. Park Hye remembered some things, though. She had seen Kim Tae move sometimes when he thought nobody was watching. Quick, precise movements that seemed too fast and too controlled for a regular person. She had seen him examine the anatomy books in the colony's medical center late at night. She had heard him talking in his sleep sometimes, using words like pressure points and nerve clusters, and disable not destroy. "This is your last chance to surrender, little human," Krexthor taunted as he prepared for combat. "If you give up now, I might let your people live as slaves instead of destroying them completely. But if you make me fight you, I promise their deaths will be slow and painful." Kim Tae said nothing in response. He simply moved into a fighting stance that looked casual and relaxed. To the watching Vorthak officers, it appeared that the human was not even trying to defend himself properly. His hands were open instead of clenched into fists. His feet were positioned all wrong for delivering powerful strikes. His entire posture suggested someone who had no idea how to fight. But Park Hye recognized that stance, even though she had only seen it a few times over the years. It was the way Kim Tae stood when he was checking the balance on heavy mining equipment. It was how he positioned himself when he needed to move something that weighed much more than he did. It was a stance designed for using leverage and momentum, instead of raw strength. The other humans began backing away as they sensed the fight was about to begin. They formed a rough circle around the two combatants, but stayed far enough back to avoid getting caught in the violence. Some of them were quietly crying because they believed they were about to watch their leader die. Krexthor looked around at the fearful faces and smiled with satisfaction. This was exactly how it should be. The weak humans would watch their champion get destroyed, and then they would understand the futility of resisting the Empire. After that, they would surrender without any more foolish ideas about fighting back. "Begin whenever you are ready, little worm," Krexthor said as he raised all four arms into a combat position. "I will try to make this quick so your people do not have to watch you suffer too long." Kim Tae closed his eyes for just a moment and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, something had changed. The peaceful colony administrator was gone, and in his place stood someone else entirely. Someone who had spent decades learning how to turn disadvantages into advantages and make superior strength work against itself. The combat area was nothing fancy, just a circle of packed dirt about 50 meters across. The human miners had marked the edges with their boots and tools. No weapons would be used, and no armor would protect either fighter. This would be pure, hand-to-hand combat between two very different kinds of warriors. Krexthor strutted into the circle like he owned the entire planet. His 4 massive arms swung freely at his sides as he moved. Each step made the ground shake slightly under his enormous weight. His metal-gray skin gleamed in the sunlight, and his red eyes glowed with confidence. He had fought in thousands of battles, and this would be the easiest victory of his long career. Kim Tae entered the circle much more quietly. He rolled his shoulders to loosen them and stretched his neck from side to side. His movements were smooth and controlled, like water flowing around rocks. He had spent the last hour sitting alone in his quarters, remembering lessons from Master Lee Sung back on Earth many years ago. The strongest tree breaks in the storm, but the flexible reed survives, the old teacher had always said. Do not try to match your enemy's strength. Instead, find ways to use that strength against them. Make their power become their weakness. Kim Tae had taught those same lessons to hundreds of Special Forces soldiers during his 20 years as an instructor. Now he would have to use everything he knew to survive the next few minutes. The alien general was incredibly powerful, but power without wisdom could become a disadvantage in the right circumstances. This is your final chance to surrender, little human, Krexthor taunted as he flexed all 4 arms. The muscles bulged under his metallic skin like steel cables. I might let your people live as slaves instead of destroying them completely if you admit defeat right now. Kim Tae said nothing. He simply took his fighting stance and waited. To everyone watching, it looked like he was not even trying to defend himself properly. His hands were open and relaxed. His feet were positioned for movement rather than delivering power. His entire posture suggested someone who planned to run away rather than fight. The Vorthak officers who had come to watch started laughing at the pathetic display. How could this soft, weak human hope to challenge their supreme general? Even a sick Vorthak child would be more dangerous than this frightened little creature. The fight would be over in seconds. Krexthor decided to end things quickly. He wanted the other humans to see how hopeless resistance was against the Empire. A fast, brutal victory would break their spirits completely and make the rest of the conquest much easier. He gathered his strength and prepared to charge. The general exploded forward with incredible speed for something his size. All 4 arms drew back and then shot forward in a devastating attack pattern. 2 fists aimed high at the human's head and chest, while 2 more swept low toward his legs and stomach. It was an attack that should have been impossible for any creature to dodge or survive. But when the 4 massive fists reached their target, Kim Tae was not there anymore. He had stepped aside at the very last possible moment, using the aliens' own momentum against him. As Krexthor stumbled past him, unbalanced by his own powerful charge, Kim Tae's elbow struck with surgical precision at a specific spot on the general's lower spine. It was a nerve cluster that Kim Tae had identified during his years of studying alien anatomy. The general staggered forward as sudden numbness spread through his legs. What had just happened? How had this tiny human moved so fast? How had he known exactly where to strike? The attack had been too quick and too precise to be lucky. This human actually knew what he was doing. Kim Tae was already moving again before Krexthor could recover. He flowed around the alien's massive form like smoke, finding every gap and weakness. His movements were not random or panicked. Every step, every strike, every dodge was part of a larger plan that the watching aliens could not understand. Impossible! Krexthor snarled as he spun around to face his opponent. "You should be dead! No human can move that fast or strike that precisely." But Kim Tae was not fighting like the aliens expected. He was not trying to trade blow for blow or match the general's raw power. Instead, he was using techniques that turned the fight into something completely different. This was not a battle between two warriors. This was a hunt, and Kim Tae was the hunter. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters on Earth long before they developed technology. They did not chase prey by being faster or stronger than their targets. Instead, they outlasted them, wearing them down with patience and endurance until the perfect moment came to strike. Kim Tae was using those same ancient instincts now. Krexthor launched another series of attacks, but they all missed their target. The human seemed to know where each punch would land before it was even thrown. He slipped past the massive fists and responded with quick, precise strikes to joints and nerve points that the alien had not even known were vulnerable. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Krexthor bellowed as frustration began to replace his confidence. His superior strength seemed useless against this strange fighting style. Every powerful swing left him more open to the human's surgical attacks. "I am fighting like a warrior," Kim Tae replied calmly as he dodged another wild swing. "This is how humans fight when facing impossible odds. We do not try to be stronger than our enemies. We try to be smarter." What the alien general did not understand was that his 4 arms were actually a disadvantage in this situation. Having more limbs made him powerful, but it also made his nervous system more complex. There were more pressure points to target and more joints that could be damaged. Kim Tae had spent years learning exactly where those weak spots were located. A perfectly timed strike to Krexthor's right shoulder made that entire arm go completely numb. The general tried to move it, but nothing happened. The human had done something to the nerves that controlled the limb. Now he only had 3 functioning arms instead of 4. "What are you doing to me?" Krexthor demanded as panic began to creep into his voice. "What kind of sorcery is this?" Kim Tae continued his methodical assault. Each strike targeted a specific nerve cluster or joint that would disable rather than destroy. He was taking apart the alien general piece by piece like a mechanic dismantling a broken machine. The watching humans began to realize that their quiet leader was not losing this fight. He was winning it. Krexthor was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. His right arm hung useless at his side no matter how hard he tried to move it. The human had struck some kind of nerve point that completely shut down the limb. 200 years of combat, no enemy had ever done anything like this to him. The general tried to adapt to fighting with only 3 arms, but Kim Tae was already adjusting to the change. The human moved around him like a dancer who knew every step of the routine. His strikes came from unexpected angles, targeting places that Krexthor could not protect with his remaining limbs. "You cannot keep running forever, little worm," Krexthor growled as he launched another series of attacks. But even as he said it, he could hear the doubt in his own voice. This human was not running at all. He was hunting with the patience of a predator who knew his prey was already trapped. Kim Tae slipped past another wild swing, and his knuckles found a pressure point near Krexthor's left elbow. The alien's second arm immediately went numb and lifeless. Now the mighty general had lost half of his limbs, and the fight was only 3 minutes old. The watching Vorthak officers stood in stunned silence as their supreme commander struggled against an opponent half his size. "This is impossible," Commander Vextar whispered to his fellow officers. "How can a soft, weak human be defeating our greatest warrior? General Krexthor has conquered entire star systems. He has killed enemies that were 3 times larger than this pathetic creature." But Park Hye was watching from the crowd of human miners, and she was beginning to understand what was happening. Kim Tae was not just randomly striking at the alien. Every move was planned and precise. He was using knowledge that he had gained during his years as a military instructor to take apart an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. She remembered fragments of conversations from years past. Kim Tae talking about pressure points and nerve clusters while examining medical texts. Him mentioning the importance of understanding alien anatomy before humans encountered hostile species in space. Comments about using an enemy's strength against them that she had thought were just philosophical observations. Now she realized that Kim Tae had been preparing for exactly this kind of fight for decades. Even during his peaceful years as a colony administrator, he had continued studying and learning. Part of him had always known that someday humanity would face enemies like the Vorthak Empire, and someone would need to know how to fight back. Krexthor was starting to panic as his third arm began to feel strange and unresponsive. The human had done something to it during his last attack, but the general could not figure out what. His limbs were failing one by one, and he had no idea how to stop it from happening. "What kind of warrior are you?" he demanded as he swung his one remaining functional arm at Kim Tae's head. "Real fighters use strength and courage, not these cowardly tricks." Kim Tae easily avoided the clumsy attack and responded with 2 quick strikes that made Krexthor's left leg buckle. "I am the kind of warrior my species created to fight yours," he replied calmly. "We knew we would face enemies stronger and larger than us, so we learned to fight smart instead of fighting hard." The truth was that humans had always been the underdogs in their own evolution. They were not the fastest animals on Earth, or the strongest, or the most dangerous. They survived by being clever and adaptable and by working together. When they reached space, they brought those same qualities with them. Kim Tae had spent his military career studying every alien species that intelligence services could identify. He learned their strengths and weaknesses, their fighting styles, and their blind spots. He developed techniques specifically designed to work against physically superior opponents. Everything he had learned was now being put to the ultimate test. Krexthor tried to grab Kim Tae with his one working arm, but the human slipped away like water through his fingers. A perfectly placed strike to the alien's shoulder made his final limb go completely numb. Now the mighty general stood helpless with all 4 arms hanging useless at his sides. "No," Krexthor whispered as the reality of his situation began to sink in. "This cannot be happening. I am General Krexthor of the Vorthak Empire. I have never been defeated in battle. I cannot lose to a weak, pathetic human." But he was losing, and everyone watching could see it. The alien, who had seemed so powerful and terrifying just minutes ago now, looked clumsy and helpless. His massive size had become a disadvantage because it made him an easier target. His 4 arms had become weaknesses because they provided more pressure points to attack. Kim Tae continued his methodical assault, but he was not trying to cause permanent damage. Every strike was calculated to disable rather than destroy. He could have killed the alien general at any point during the fight, but that was not his goal. He wanted to prove that humans could defend themselves without becoming monsters. The watching. Humans began to cheer as they realized their leader was winning. Children who had been hiding behind their parents now peered out to see the impossible sight. The terrifying alien general who had threatened to destroy their colony was being systematically taken apart by their quiet administrator. "How did you know?" Krexthor asked, as his voice broke with desperation. "How did you know where to strike? How did you move so fast? How did you make my strength useless against you?" Kim Tae paused in his attack for a moment to look at the defeated alien. There was no hatred in his eyes, only a sad kind of understanding. "Because my species has been fighting creatures bigger and stronger than us since we lived in caves, General. We learned that brain beats muscle, and technique defeats power, and patience conquers rage." The fight was almost over now. Krexthor could barely stand with his disabled limbs and damaged nervous system. But Kim Tae was not finished yet. He had one final lesson to teach about human warfare, and the alien general was going to learn it whether he wanted to or not. "Impossible!" Krexthor gasped, backing away for the first time in the fight. His remaining two arms felt heavy and unresponsive. The human had done something to his nervous system that his military training had never prepared him for. Kim Tae pursued relentlessly but calmly. This was the crucial moment Master Li had always taught about, when your enemy's confidence breaks and fear takes over. Your strength was your weakness, General. You never learned to fight smart because you never had to. The watching Vorthak officers stood in stunned silence. Their supreme commander, the terror of 17 star systems, was losing to an unarmed human half his size. Some began reaching for their weapons, but they had given their word about single combat. Krexthor made one final desperate attack, both remaining arms striking downward with all his might. It was exactly what Kim Tae had been waiting for. He stepped inside the attack, letting the massive fists pass harmlessly beside him, and struck upward at two specific points on Krexthor's upper arms. The sound of something important snapping echoed across the silent settlement. Both of Krexthor's remaining arms fell useless to his sides. The nerve pathways that controlled them had been severed by precise strikes that only someone with deep knowledge of anatomy could perform. The mighty general stood helpless, all four of his powerful limbs rendered completely useless. Krexthor fell to his knees, not from pain, but from the devastating realization of what had happened. In less than 5 minutes, an unarmed human had completely destroyed him without taking a single injury. Everything he believed about strength and power lay shattered in the dirt around him. "How?" he whispered, his voice broken. "How did you know?" Kim Tae knelt beside the fallen general, his voice gentle now that the fight was over. "Because humans have been fighting creatures bigger and stronger than us since we lived in caves. We learned that brain beats muscle, that technique defeats power, that patience conquers rage." The human miners gathered around, no longer afraid. Their quiet leader had just done what seemed impossible, defeated the most feared warrior in the known galaxy, using nothing but skill and knowledge. "Your empire conquers through fear and strength," Kim Tae continued, helping the disabled general sit up properly. "But humans, we survive through adaptation. We study our enemies. We find their weaknesses. We turn their advantages into disadvantages." Word of the battle spread quickly through Vorthak space. The story grew with each telling, how a small, weak human had defeated their greatest general in single combat, leaving him armless and helpless in mere minutes. Other conquered species began to whisper among themselves. If the mighty Krexthor could fall so easily, perhaps the Vorthak weren't as invincible as they claimed. The mining colony of Kepler 442b remained free, but more importantly, humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as the species that could find a way to win against impossible odds, the species that turned disadvantages into advantages and made their enemies' strength work against them. General Krexthor would eventually recover the use of his arms, but he never forgot the lesson that small human taught him in 5 minutes of perfect combat. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from being the strongest, but from being the smartest.